Hello and welcome. It's nice to be back to this quiet spot to talk to you at this time of day, late morning, and to have fallen back into my routine that I had established in accordance with our usual practices wherever we live, but was going so well until the little interruption, which is now all over with. One question was with regards to, can monks be sick or do they have to disrobe? I noticed in the comments, so somebody must have watched a recent talk and not seen all of the lead up. But of course, monks get sick. The Buddha himself suffered extreme pain, dysentery and all sorts towards the end of his life, and during his teaching life, many occasions in the suttas he would say to Ananda, his close disciple, please you carry on, I must get up now, my back is paining me, I will leave and you finish talking. We all experience pain and suffering. This is what we are reflecting upon, this is what we are learning to understand, that suffering is normal. It is the cause of suffering coming from our initially ignorance or lack of understanding. This lack of understanding that it's normal or usual to expect discomfort in these physical bodies and even difficulties with the emotions of our thinking minds that we would rather not have. And it is the not having or the not wanting of those experiences that exacerbate this suffering, because we not only have the suffering in the first instance, but the aversion and the not wanting of the suffering is something we find far more apparent than the suffering itself. And when we learn through this practice to get over that, as the expression goes, and accept, well, you're aging, you will get sick, you will die. As from my own experience recently, through really injury, a bit of overdoing it, I've subsequently been nagged quite a lot about, because some people have helped with carrying the goods back from Pindapat and expressed sort of shock and dismay. Well, you know, Bhante, you were doing this on your own for 2 months. No wonder you caused yourself a hernia and went to hospital, because it's rather too much for one. But that's, I understood and was planning and working around ways to drop things off on my route, and it was in place. It was probably an inevitability anyway. But in terms of that comment or that question, yes, we get sick. What do we do about treatment? Well, our Sangha, our fellow monks, look after. We all have a duty to look after other monks that we're living with. Ultimately, if one has to go to the hospital, then this is arranged as ordinary. Nothing too different there. The 4 requisites of a monk are the robes, the pindapat, so food offered. Robes are the clothing, food that is offered on alms round each day, shelter, and gilana pachaya, which is medicine. So that is the Pali term we use, gilana pachaya, or tonics or medicine, which can be anything as basic as fermented urine to modern day drugs that probably I have been on just recently, like some probably slow release diclofenac or something of these natures. Not intoxicants. Don't all write in and say, oh, you've taken some painkillers, you're not a real monk, you've taken intoxicants. You know, you do as the doctor prescribes, and we as much also consider our teacher, the Buddha, our doctor, and his prescription for us all is this practice of keeping moral virtue, sila, practicing meditation, samadhi, and developing wisdom, panya. that is reducing our unwholesome mind states and increasing our wholesome mind states. And that alone is sufficient to build this understanding of the characteristics of this very existence we are experiencing, this life we have. That it is impermanent, anicca, that it is suffering, dukkha, and anatta, it is not self, it is not within our scope of control. I noticed a comment. I haven't been looking at the comments for a couple of days. I like to take 2 days out of any needing, unless necessary, to message something or whatever important, but using or looking at the comments and looking at the phone, emails and things each week, so that I just refresh and put 100% into my practice with no questions arising about this email or that email. I'm quite proficient these days at compartmentalizing, so it isn't an issue, but that extra 2 days is beneficial, I think, to me, and hopefully the end results eventually one day will be to you also. So we learn this understanding of the reality of our existence, that it is impermanent, we're suffering, we can't control these things. And one of those comments I noticed said, oh, you run away from the world, you're just a monk, you should just control your urges in your mind, and all you're clinging to and attached to is this walking 7 kilometers a day to get your food and all these austere practices. I think if that commenter was to think about that, or maybe see some of the other talks, they'd see perhaps it's quite the reverse of that. Firstly, we're not actually escaping, and this is really more about renunciation and letting go this practice as opposed to acquisition. Like I've said previously, acquisition is dukkha, is suffering. Renunciation, so getting rid of, is sukha, is happiness. And the one comment I don't get, or question, let's say, that I don't notice coming up very often is, how can I be happy? Because after all, isn't that what's behind all of this blah, blah, blah? They have this wonderful expression here, blah, 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 which I'm sure is in other countries too, meaning just talking, blah, blah, blah. Usually accompanied with this hand movement and associated here with a bit of a telling off or a bit of a lecture. It's kind of referred to as a monk's Dharma talk. Here is a bit of monk going blah, blah, blah. Hence, this is some blah, blah, blah here. Like my Pali word that I love so much, sampapalapa, similar sounding. It is just talking unnecessarily. I can read some very long questions I've spoken about previously in just a recent video with my little nag about some of the questions going a little bit in the, maybe not in the direction of what we're talking about here on this channel. But also sometimes we can think so much, can't we? Think, analyze, overthink, be over analytical about this and that and this technique and that technique and all of these theories and theses, and what's the point? What do you want? What's behind your question? What is behind the comment? Surely as all beings we are just wanting to be happy, and happiness, it comes from contentment. Now, when we find contentment in whatever it is, now if that contentment is, as that commenter said, running away, doing that, and say living this lifestyle, then if it produces, or the end result is contentment, then inevitably there will be, as a result of that, happiness. So those actions are karma. Karma means actions. The results we call in Pali vipaka. And the vipaka of those good actions are indeed contentment and happiness. It could be the other extreme he quoted, that it should be a life of, well, if you're strong-minded, you are in control of your mind. He used these terms. then you can have a life of sex, drugs and rock and roll, hedonistic pleasure, and no problem. Yes, you can. I used to have a life as such long time ago, in a previous lifetime within this lifetime, of just pure hedonistic pleasure and enjoyment, but ultimately found through experience that this was not really giving me contentment. So therefore temporary happiness as a result of momentary pleasure, but nothing long lasting, trying to continually satisfy insatiable desires. And that's what moved me into this direction. Nothing to stop me going back in the other direction. Now I'd invite that commenter to come and go, not come here, but go and try this lifestyle. Now if he can stay for say 7 days, 10 days, a month, 3 months in maybe an international monastery where they speak English, like Wat Pa Nanachat in northeast Thailand, and see just how strong he is, how controllable his mind is, how he can control his desires rather than just giving in to them. And this is the proof. This is the evidence that the Buddha didn't preach, didn't teach us a simple philosophy, but he gave us the tools, the wherewithal, the knowledge from his own experience to try it out for ourselves. And that is simply all I'm doing here, trying it out for myself. And it says in the chanting, each and every day that we chant, to be experienced by the wise. So when I am wise, I'll hopefully experience some of the piti and sukha that the Buddha refers to. Another comment was on that subject, that the Buddha only condoned pleasures of the mind but not pleasures of the body. This isn't technically quite correct. It is more, he condoned, is that the right word? Is that saying it's okay? Anyway, he said it was okay to have pleasure, because after all we're meditating for ultimately happiness. Back to that important thing. It doesn't matter how long your question is, really, if the answer, if we say forget the question, just do this and you'll be happy, you probably, if it was a guarantee with it, just forget the question and get on doing what needs to be done. And that's what the Buddha said. Forget all your questions, really. Practice sila, samadhi, panya. Keep just 5 precepts, that's all. And practice meditation, and you'll get wisdom. And then from that you'll have contentment, and then you'll be happy. And in meditation, when you develop this samadhi, being able to keep your attention on just one thing, for even the shortest of times, but just to be mindful, but aware and present in the present moment, in the current moment, here and now, not thinking about the past, not dreaming about the future. The past is gone, it cannot be changed, the future hasn't happened yet. But right here and now, experiencing all that is going on and seeing it with the truth behind it of anicca, dukkha, anatta, impermanent suffering and not self, then when you can really experience and see that, you will find there's such a release, feeling of, well, this is what it's all about. This moment here and now. And for now, whilst I'm sitting in this time of meditation, this is all I need to experience. And from that arises immense feelings of, in the Pali, piti and sukha. Sukha is happiness, piti is like physical rapture. So sukha is like the emotion of happiness from contentment of the mind. Just happiness is an emotion, isn't it? Sukha is more a physical rapture, the kind of buzz one gets throughout your body at the wonderful ending of a rom-com movie, or a beautiful crescendo in some musical piece you're listening to, a great ending to a book. This shivery super feeling, rapture. So sukha, piti and rapture by no means are considered bad things, but in fact it's positively encouraged through this practice. So if you want to ask me any question at all, ask me that. How do I get there, Bhante? And my answer is, do this. Not this, you don't have to dress like this or come here, but you can practice sila, you can keep 5 precepts, practice meditation. But that's enough. The wisdom will come, will develop from your own experience of just doing that. So to say that, well, you could, if you're really strong-minded, just go and have a hedonistic life of sex, drugs and rock and roll and all will be well, you'll appreciate when to stop and this and that, is fair enough. But very few of us, in fact none of us, can control our minds. Do you know what your next thought will be? Ask yourself that question. Wait, see. Are you in control of it? No. Do you know where the next itch will be on your body? No. Do you know when you will die? No. All of these questions we cannot answer. We don't need to be able to answer. What we need to answer and understand is that it isn't us that's driving those end results. Only through our actions of body, speech and mind can we direct to some extent them. We can look after our bodies. So back to the can we have health care and so on and so forth. Yes, these bodies are a vehicle of ours. Now if I was to leave my injury unattended, I may have gone on for a few more weeks or even months on Pindapata, seeing people, visiting them every day at their houses, yes, to get food, but also so that they have the presence of a bhikkhu at their house, maybe offering them some blessings, but just the seeing, like an advertisement man in one of those old-fashioned sandwich boards they wear, saying golf sale, or even in London, Jesus is coming soon, or one of these moving advertisements. This form is like that for this practice. This is why the Buddha asked us to remain dependent on lay people, men and women, upasikas and upasikas, for that purpose, so that we are in continual contact. We haven't run away. We've not gone on to live in a cave and grown our own potatoes and become self-sufficient, because this Buddha Sasana, the religion, or this Sangha, this body of monks and nuns, would have died out a long time ago if we had, because there would have been no further generations or new monks to come along. We're celibate, we wouldn't have made any more, and even if we had, they would have grown up in perhaps what would be considered a rather unhealthy, insular community environment, but it could be considered, it's been tried before, this kind of cult. It doesn't work. You need interaction with society. There's proof in that if you look at any organisation that's taken its community out of society, how long has it lasted? I mean, you can research them all, but none have lasted 2,566 years, nearly 67 years, like this Buddha Sasana, this Sangha. That is because this Sangha is part of a fourfold assembly, that of bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, that's monks and nuns, upasikas and upasikas, that's laymen and laywomen. So they look after us. So today I received, or yesterday, last evening, in the post, some reading glasses. Now I don't need them here because it's bright and sunshiny. Well, and I'm not reading anything, am I? But sometimes when I read your questions, I'm struggling a little bit. I'm 56, it's to be expected, isn't it? And if I'm in my kuti, it's a bit dark there, just a candle, so I need some reading glasses. But they're not so easy to get here. But with the grace and generosity of dana offerings I've received from you, and in particularly someone for this purpose sent this dana offering for me to get some reading glasses. They've eventually arrived. It takes a little while. It's not like an Amazon delivery in a big country where it can come the next day. You have to wait some weeks here, but it's no problem. I had my old super glued together ones for any important things like reading prescriptions or whatever medicine I was supposed to take at the time. But they've arrived, and that is help. That is Galana Pachaya. That is our fourth medicine. People have also provided for and helped with all of the other medicinal requirements of the surgery I've needed, which I have to have privately here because I'm not a Sri Lankan citizen. They would, as a monk, gladly treat me, and probably anyone, I think any foreigners here, on the governmental system. But I think it's fair, coming from a another country, not to burden their already overburdened system. So I elected to go privately from various, maybe dip into some emergency insurance funds that are available, but it hasn't been necessary. It's been even that very well supported by upasikas, upasikas. So that is what sustained this Sangha. And the Sangha is very much part of, well, it is the very evident and seeable, in certainly Buddhist countries especially, part of Buddhism. But when we take refuge, that is, we say, okay, I'm going to try this Buddhism out really seriously now, one thing we can do is take refuge in the Buddha. And that isn't some kind of conversion into believing in a God or a particular teacher or a Messiah. It is just an acceptance of that for a little, you're going to put your faith, put your confidence in a teacher. Not I'll listen to a little bit of the Buddha, a little bit of Jesus, a little bit of Muhammad, and a little bit of Shiva or whoever you want to throw into the mix. No, you say, right, I'm going to take refuge in the Buddha, and along with that, here's the teacher, the Dharma, his teachings, and along with that, the Sangha, and they are monks and nuns whom are here today still practicing directly in this form that he also gave as the alternative for anyone to take on. So anyone who is a layperson can also take on this form as a monk or a nun if they want to expand upon the 5 precepts to 227 or 311, or they can stay as lay people. Now, neither way is wrong or right, better or worse. It's up to each individual to decide for themselves. If your circumstances are such that you are able to, and you have few responsibilities in worldly life, able to dedicate your life to the practice, then indeed it's a very worthwhile way of doing it in this form, because you have this support. Clothing, food, shelter, and medicine. What more do you need? Nothing. You don't need TV, you don't need central heating, you don't need, maybe if you're in the wind, in a cold country you might, all of the extras that people have in lay life to make their lives more comfortable. We are not austere practitioners. It is not an ascetic practice. There are some only 13 allowable ascetic practices that the Buddha doesn't discourage or encourage, but allows for the more determined amongst us. I am to some extent, because some of those I practice, like just having the 1 set of robes, just eating 1 meal a day, because although we don't eat in the afternoon, it's perfectly okay to have breakfast and lunch, or even a late, breakfast and up to midday. You can more or less eat what you like when you like after dawn. But I choose to just have the 1 meal after Pindapart, and also, I can't think of the others at the moment, but there's 13, so that's another talk anyway. But with regards to this, it isn't that austere. It's called the middle way, the middle path. Now, in relation to the Western world and the life I came from, yes, it is considered a little bit harsh, but I don't think of it as such, because I've been living like this for a long time. It's very normal for me. It's perhaps only noticeable when I mix it. So going from my normal life, that I consider normal for this form, a monk, to stay in hospital for 1 night was a little strange. Even being this is not a hospital that I might experience in my own country, because they're just a little different to the hospitals in our own countries. The comforts were far greater than I have obviously in my normal just kuti where I live and sleep on the floor. But I did manage, as soon as the feelings came back into my legs and I was able to get disconnected from the pipe work that they plug into you, move out of this big bed that they put me on for the night. I didn't sleep. It was too painful. And get onto this, what they have as a little flat guest bed in the room for your mother or father or brother or sister or uncle to come and stay with you overnight, because they like to do that here in Asia. Well, Gamini said he would come, my helper here, but I didn't want him to do that, so I'm quite happy on my own. So I was able to move on to this little lower bed, not quite onto the floor. I thought that would be a little bit, they wouldn't have liked that much, because they're very respectful of monks and they wouldn't accept a sick monk being on the floor. So in terms of sickness, we're looked after like anyone else. In terms of paying for it, administering all of that, that's down to lay people whom support this Sangha. So when you're taking refuge in the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha, you're taking that, you're improving your confidence in the Buddha as a teacher, his teachings, the Dharma and the Sangha, that they will live as an example to you, not preaching to you, not lecturing you, none of this blah blah blah, but as an example to you as to how the Buddha taught his close disciples to live in order to find the answer to that question, how can I be happy? Well, just like this. This is how you are happy, through finding contentment in the simplest of things, in the simplest way of life. And when you can find contentment in giving things up, letting go of things, in renunciation, when you can find satisfaction in that, pushing away, giving away, letting go of, rather than getting, grabbing, that thirsty craving, you'll see that that is the cause of the suffering, that desire. But the desire to just let go is very much a source of release, peace, tranquility, calm, samatha, as they call it. And we see clearly in Vipassana, samatha Vipassana isn't some special magic technique. It is a quality that we can develop through just this way of living. Not through that hedonistic sex, drugs and rock and roll way of living. Not in a competitive workplace, educational environment where you're constantly trying to achieve targets, higher standards. Why? You'll die. None of that goes with you. It doesn't mean we can't further, to the best of our abilities, what we are doing in terms of right livelihood, at least that is, in this lifetime, but it isn't necessary to do that for happiness. That is an optional extra. Happiness can only be found in contentment, and contentment will not be found at the end of a chain of events like, well, if I pass this exam, that'll be it, because there's always a further and higher level exam. If I get this promotion, that'll be it, because there's always a further higher promotion. There's no end to it. But if you can actually see the pleasure in sitting and being fully aware of each and every breath as you breathe, and develop piti, happiness in your mind, sukha, rapture in your body, from just that, you need go out no further than this body for contentment. You need not see, hear, smell, taste, touch, or feel anything. In fact, you can become fully absorbed in your meditation object, to the exclusion of all seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, touching, and even thinking, so that you abide purely in this state of piti and sukha, of happiness and rapture. And then you are experiencing for yourself, knowing for yourself, and it is there you have established this ultimate wisdom of awakeness and knowing. And I think on that note I should leave it there. If there's something useful there, I hope you can use it. If not, you can just let that go. But that doesn't mean you can't try elsewhere. The Buddha's teachings are everywhere, in all different forms. But the simplicity of the Buddha's teachings is such that there is the common underlying theme of these Four Noble Truths, the Noble Eightfold Path, that you alone, without any intervention can come to understand and practice yourselves and be content and therefore find happiness. So although you didn't ask the question, how can I be happy? I hope this is how you can find the way to be happy. Without thinking about long questions, just think about how can I be happy? And then you can be. So, on that note, be happy and stay well. Thank you for watching.